Welcome to the tutorial on the extrinsic muscles of the larynx. Recall that extrinsic muscles will have one end in the larynx and then extend beyond the larynx. Most of the extrinsic muscles of the larynx you're about to learn are in the neck. These muscles are known as the strap muscles because they act like straps to anchor the larynx and pull it either up or down. Remember that these muscles are most important for swallowing, especially to move the larynx out of the way to protect the airway during swallowing. There are two classes of extrinsic muscles of the larynx. We will learn about 4 laryngeal elevators and 3 laryngeal depressor muscles. Since the elevators all insert at points above the hyoid bone, they are also referred to as suprahyoid muscles. In contrast, the laryngeal depressors insert at points below the hyoid bone, so are referred to as infrahyoid muscles. This schematic diagram offers a nice depiction of the extrinsic elevators and depressors of the larynx. Let's first learn about the laryngeal elevators. In your notes outline, I have organized these 4 muscles in order of their nerve innervations to help you remember them. The first laryngeal elevator, or suprahyoid muscle, is the mylohyoid. The prefix mylo refers to muscle in Greek, so this is a muscle of the hyoid bone. This large fan-shaped muscle makes up the bulk of the floor of your mouth. Go ahead, poke your finger up into the floor of your mouth from under your chin, and notice that this is all soft tissue. The mylohyoid muscle helps to contain the contents of the floor of the mouth, as well as move it in different directions. The mylohyoid muscle originates along the inner surface of the jawbone, or mandible. It courses posteriorly and inferiorly to insert into the corpus of the hyoid bone. Look at the 2 images shown here. The image on the left is a superior view of the jaw and hyoid bones. The mylohyoid muscle is the large fan-like muscle that goes underneath the other midline muscle, which you'll learn about later. In the image on the right, this is an anterior view of the neck and floor of the mouth. This time we are taking a superficial view. The mylohyoid muscle is still the large fan-shaped muscle in the floor of the mouth, but notice there is another superficial muscle underneath it. You'll learn about that muscle next. Next is the digastric muscle. Gastric refers to the stomach, or belly if you will, so digastric means 2-bellied. This suprahyoid laryngeal elevator muscle has 2 bellies, an anterior belly that originates on the inside at the midline of the mandible, and a posterior belly that originates from the mastoid process behind your ear. Both bellies insert onto the hyoid bone via an intermediate tendon. The anterior belly is supplied by the 5th cranial nerve, the trigeminal, similar to the mylohyoid in the floor of the mouth. The anterior belly of the digastric is superficial to the mylohyoid muscle under your chin. The posterior belly is innervated by the 7th cranial nerve, the facial. When both bellies of the digastric muscle contract together, the net effect is to raise the hyoid bone superiorly. Next is the stylohyoid muscle. This suprahyoid laryngeal elevator muscle originates from the styloid process behind the ear and courses downward to insert onto the hyoid bone. If you look closely at figure 37.8a and c, notice that the stylohyoid muscle splits into 2 as it passes around the posterior belly of the digastric muscle before connecting to the hyoid bone. The stylohyoid muscle, similar to the posterior belly of the digastric muscle, is innervated by the 7th cranial nerve, the facial. When the stylohyoid muscle contracts, this action helps to raise the hyoid bone up and backward. The 4th and final suprahyoid muscle is the geniohyoid. Genio comes from the Greek word meaning chin, so this muscle spans between the chin and the hyoid bone. Specifically, this laryngeal elevator originates from the inside midline of the mandible, similar to the anterior belly of the digastric muscle, but note that the geniohyoid muscle is deep to the mylohyoid. Geniohyoid courses down and back from the mandible to insert into the hyoid bone. It is innervated by cranial nerve 12, the hypoglossal. The hypoglossal nerve innervates the tongue and many of the other muscles near the tongue. Geniohyoid is deep to mylohyoid, within the floor of the mouth near the tongue, so that may help you remember that it is supplied by the hypoglossal nerve. When geniohyoid contracts, the effect is to raise the hyoid bone up and forward. Take a moment to reflect on the 4 suprahyoid laryngeal elevators and look for patterns to help you remember these extrinsic laryngeal muscles. You can also refer to pages 562 and 563 in your atlas for more images. Now let's switch to thinking about the 3 major infrahyoid laryngeal depressors. These muscles are innervated by spinal muscles from C1 through 3, and you do not need to know these nerves. The first 2 originate from the sternum bone, which you will recall from the bones of the thoracic cavity. Let's get right to it. The first infrahyoid is the sternohyoid. As its name implies, this laryngeal depressor originates from the inner surface of the sternum bone. Note that it is deep to sternocleidomastoid, and courses upward to insert into the hyoid bone. When sternohyoid muscles contract, the hyoid bone will be pulled downward. The next infrahyoid muscle is sternothyroid. As its name implies, this laryngeal depressor originates from the inner surface of the sternum bone and courses upward to insert onto the oblique line of the thyroid cartilage. When sternothyroid muscles contract, the thyroid cartilage will be pulled downward. Remember the digastric two-bellied laryngeal elevator? Well, we wouldn't be complete without a two-bellied laryngeal depressor muscle as well. The omohyoid muscle, then, is a two-bellied infrahyoid muscle that will help depress the larynx when it contracts. Omo comes from the Greek for shoulder, so this muscle originates on top of your shoulder blade, or scapula. You should recall the scapula as one of the bones of the pectoral girdle from the respiratory system. The omohyoid courses from the scapula upward and inward to the hyoid bone. The two bellies, known as the superior and inferior bellies, are joined by an intermediate tendon, which rests deep to the sternocleidomastoid muscle. The net action of contraction of this muscle is also to depress or pull the larynx downward. Take a moment to reflect on the 3 infrahyoid laryngeal depressors and look for patterns to help you remember these extrinsic laryngeal muscles. You can also refer to pages 562 and 563 in your atlas for more images. Note that we are not including thyrohyoid muscle because it can both elevate and depress the larynx. Therefore, it is neither an elevator nor a depressor. Note that even though the extrinsic muscles mostly inserted into the hyoid bone, or one onto the thyroid cartilage, remember which one? The net effect is movement of the entire larynx. Recall that the hyoid bone is connected to the thyroid cartilage, which is connected to the cricoid cartilage, and so on. Thus, both the suprahyoid and infrahyoid muscles can pull the larynx as a whole in different directions.